Welcome, everybody, to our energy forecast for 2020 and especially January. I like to start the forecast with a review. I've explained this a few times. This is a very important spiritual practice. It's very important that we realize that our past, our present, and our future are connected with another. And by reviewing and looking back at what our present self, now past self, from a month ago projected into this time and what really happened is a skill that the spiritually awakened person needs to practice. It's a big part of what we will have to discipline here for this coming new future that we all feeling is coming in. I call this truth training. All right. Always going into feedback with ourselves, always staying awake and alert. How did the uncertainty paradox that was coming in December and the mental overlay dealing with a lot of back and forth internally and letting go of causation, the chicken and the egg problem, remember? Everything is backward. It's not awakening. So awakening is something that we have been going through here in these past 30 years, okay? That's the process of waking up. But then there is the state of being awake, of having been red-pilled, all right, in reference to the Matrix movie, the first 30 minutes of the movie. And yes, wakefulness to me is basically divided into these different other fullnesses. Starting with mindfulness, and many of you know my confliction with the word mindfulness. We all already have a mindful, but we're learning how to discipline our mind, how to calm our thinkingness, the thinkingness that is linked to our 3Dness, all right? So this collective thought field around us. That is indeed useful, and many of us have been spending the last 30 years since the rise of New Age, basically, with practicing, things such as meditation, tapping, yoga, and breathing. All these things belong into the group mindfulness, okay, helping us to discipline our mind. The next level of this is the understanding that there is a soulfulness about us. And this is very much sort of the theme for the next 30 years. But it is something that emerges here in 2020 and 2021 in conjunction with what I call spiritual pragmatism or practical spirituality. All right, how can I translate all this? I am experiencing myself as a 3D person, and I'm also experiencing myself as a soul self. And I'm feeling this pull, I'm feeling this impulse to individuate myself as a soul, but at the same time, the more soulful I become, the more I recognize that there is also something like a togetherness, all right? So this is no longer tied to collective karma, to collective beliefs, to collective expressions of emotions, and it's not even tied to collective energies anymore. But at the same time, I am in it, and so my intention here needs to focus around how I can translate this, how I can bring this into a more graceful expression, and that is then what I call gracefulness. So awakeness is one of the phases that we go through that starts it. Once we can control our body, our mind, and emotion, once we've got the mindfulness down, all right, then something happens. And this is basically the backdrop here, the larger context to everything that is going to happen in our collective awareness. All right, there is an awakening happening. All right, this has been going on for some time, but now it's moving into its practical expression. So the last 30 years, guys, was the recognition that there is something beyond 3D, the internalization of something like spirituality without dogma, without religion. Okay. And the next 30 years, they're going to be about bringing this outward again from esotericism into exotericism. Most people are not aware what the word esotericism actually means. It means knowledge or information accessible only for a few. It's protected knowledge, right? And the big transition, the big shift that is happening here and now, and that there's a lot of different reasons for this. For one, of course, the overall rise in consciousness level, the transcendence of things such as, I mean, guys, it hasn't been that long ago that women weren't even allowed to read and write. Okay, I mean, just a few hundred years. Okay, and so it's been only 100 years since women are allowed to go to universities. Just saying. Okay, it seems so far away, but up until now, the main abuse of power was through controlling information. Not even to mention all the conspiracy theories and the Vatican and whatnot, through literally locking up information. This has changed now. Right? This was the breakthrough of these last 30 years. So while we're still kind of reviewing, okay, we are reviewing not just the last year, last month, we're reviewing the last shift, the last period of development, and that helps us to better understand what this transformation truly is about. Information can no longer be controlled through force. Information is finding its way into our own individuated perception of truth. And the main task now, since information is accessible to all of us theoretically, all right, through internet, through education, through even etheric visioning, okay, is the discernment of truth, is knowing the difference. And that is what these last 30 years were about, to internalize that there is something like truth out there, to seek it, to uncover it, to reveal it, to show this the misuse, and to test it in its integrity. And this is what's changing now. We now have to apply this. We now have all this at our fingertips. We all have this accessible now. And how are we going to use this now? This is our responsibility now. So, this next phase here of collective consciousness development, of all of us basically moving up into a higher vibratory reality, okay, on all levels, will change everything. Because for the first time, by the end of this 30-year process, so it's a little far out there, but it helps to understand this, we will all be able to discern truth. But right now, okay, we're right on that crossroads point. Okay, and the next 5 years, okay, they're still going to be very split. Here in the United States, this will take just a few years longer for reasons that have to do with collective shadow work. All right, this is something I mentioned last year, a couple months ago. It will become very clear here in the course of all 2020 what these collective karmic aspects of the tribe that we are from, how they play into our personal karma. All right, we all as somebody who intergenerationally inherited the trauma and the shadow aspects from that tribe, all right? We all incarnated here to resolve this now. Okay, so this is necessary for coming to higher vibratory solutions, because a lot of the conflicts that are actually existing to this day, they're reaching back as far as 500 years, some of them even 1,000 or 2,000 years. Okay, and they need to be resolved karmically or etherically so that humanity can move forward. Collective development in these next 5 years is it's going to schism us all. Not that we already have a lot to do with our inner duality, but on this collective level, in order to move to these higher or more sophisticated paradigms of coexistence and co-creation and peaceful oneness and compassionate lovingness with another, these things all have to be resolved. Okay, so this is like far out there, hard to imagine right now, but this is actually exactly what this transformation is about. And this will make it clear why so many people are constantly talking about this. So this next year, guys, is literally the truth training that is needed to grow into this higher awakeness slash awareness and the healthier expression of that. All right, from eso to exoterism, from internalization of our powers, which is our job right now to recognize this, because most of us are still schismed in that way. We're waiting for permission. We have this like weirdo idea, and this is literally becoming aware to us that we have been sitting there waiting for permission from the outside, from some kind of outside authority, which is no longer real, actually. So we are being forced to grow into our self-responsibility, and with our self responsibility, we need to carry this, we need to bring this out into the world, out into the community again. So you see, those are waves, those are fields within fields, and they all replicate. This is why we talk about fractals. This is why we talk about holograms in this sort of non-linear quantum way of seeing things. Learning to calm the mind allows us to recognize what can pull us out of our center, out of our awakeness, because awakeness is the prerequisite for being able to feel truth. If you really think about this, since we're talking about awakeness, all right, what is the opposite of awakeness? Asleepness, right? Asleepness. And what is asleepness? Asleepness means that you are sleeping and that you are not aware of the fact that you're sleeping until you awake. And when you wake up, that's when you realize that you had been sleeping before. Now, transpose this over to your perception of reality. Okay, the red pilling aspect of the Matrix movie. Okay, what if you have been asleep all this time, believing these falsities, believing these untruths? And now that you awake, you are suddenly realizing that it was a falsehood, that it was not true. The problem with being asleep is that we don't know that we are asleep until we wake up. And that is the big shift that is happening for us here. And when we are awake, then we realize how asleep we were before. And asleep here in this context means how we were not able to discern truth, how we were not able to perceive truth, not to mention how we were not able to live truth or manifest in truth. And this is where the collective gaslighting comes in. This is where the collective karma, the collective shadow, and the unprocessed and unhealed collective inheritance that we all carry in us plays in. All right. It's been these social values around us that have created the illusion that all these things are okay. What we mentioned earlier, abuse of power, controlling information, controlling gender or race or any kind of value along with what keeps this current power system alive. All right, the banking system, politics, the economy, the whole entire money system, the consumerism and energy, food supply, pharmaceutical supply, the relationships, marriage, how to behave, how to be a good citizen, law and order. All these things have gone unchecked up until now. And this is what's changing. And this is why this is such a huge thing that is happening right now, because it affects all areas of life, all values, all social values that we have been, just accepting unchecked. Well, we've never even asked ourselves, is this even integrous? Is this even true? Whether it's the way we do politics, there's a lot of that going on in the States right now, and also a lot of questioning, whether these what they're called democracy, if this even works. Okay, a lot of doubt, a lot of splinter groups now, a lot of new political opinions that are coming in, and the need for a more open system. All right, the way we distribute and use energy, the way we produce foods, not to mention, the whole uh, animal abuse aspect of the food industry, the way we distribute and market drugs and medication, the way the churches have been manipulating us into dependencies, the way our environment, our nature, our planet has been treated, the way we have been conducting relationships, the whole gender discussion along with this, but also this whole tribal discussion, of mixed, multicultural, multi-tribal, multi-religious relationships, not just love relationships, but also in communities, and our overall behaviors. This gaslighting into thinking that a sacrifice is honorable, right? And that to be a good blank, you have to blank, or to be a good citizen, all right, you need to obey, or to be a good husband, you have to provide. In order to be as someone who is spiritual, all right, you need to be loving and compassionate. Who says this is true? I mean, I do agree with loving compassion, but the question is, what does love and compassion really mean when it's being misused to emotionally manipulate other people? What is the archetype of the unhealed healer that most of us here in this community have experienced the effects of? What does this actually mean? This means that we've used our energetic sensitivity, we've used our empathy to cope with the adversities of our reality. And that means that we've energetically and emotionally influenced other people. It was the only resort that we had, but that's why I called this resilience training. That's why I called this joy training. And it's been very difficult, but there's no honor in it. The honor comes through recognizing the higher level of integrity in that, namely that it's actually not okay to wanting somebody to heal. It's not okay to infringe in any person's, any soul's free will to choose, regardless of how toxic or abusive it is what they're choosing. But if that's what they're choosing, our responsibility is to remove ourselves out of the vicinity, out of the effects of that. So instead of being responsible and saying no to abuse, saying no to sacrifice, saying no to all these unhealed healer empath problems, many of us still are fixated on our route is the better route. And this is not spiritual, guys, at least not in this context of soul self-awareness and higher consciousness. This is not a higher vibratory way of living. This is just a more sophisticated way of covert emotional manipulation and energetic projection. And this is why so many empaths have these problems with absorbing other people's energies, because they constantly project their own energies out. And that is an open invitation for other people to go into the counter defense of that, which is, dumping their stuff onto us. Just on a side note here, guys. Coming back to wakefulness, all right, there's an interesting question here, and this is not a dumb question at all. You're asking the only question that is really worthwhile asking. How do I know that I'm really awake? How do you know that you're really awake? You could be asleep, right? And think you're awake. This is the truth training that we're all undergoing right now. I said this last month already. There's something that happens in us when we touch down with truth. All right. And that is, we can't unsee truth. We can't unfeel truth. All right. And so the truth training is to stay awake, to stay conscious about being in truth. You are no longer awake when you are no longer aware that you're awake. And this is now what we really need to pay attention to. What makes us go asleep? What pulls our energy out of this awake state? What brings us away from the awareness that we're awake? It's our intention and attention that keep us there. But it can also pull us away from it. Namely, everything that we pay attention to, we get, how does the saying go? We do well on what we dwell on. Okay? So everything that can pull our attention away from the awareness that we are awake, from the conscious soul self-awareness. Yes, I am awake. Yes, I am in my present moment awareness. Everything that can pull us out of it. We call this attachment in energy work. Makes us go into untruths. It makes us fall asleep again. Every thought process, every domino emotional process, every physical process, our 3D-ness, the fixation on our 3D-ness, the mental and emotional overlay that we discussed last month, that is what makes us fall asleep. How many times do we catch ourselves getting pulled into something that, and we might even feel it, that makes our energy go lower and lower and lower. And we're unable to stop it. In fact, when we find ourselves in this, sort of doomed place of dark night of the soul, fearful and overwhelmed and powerless, it's almost impossible to remember that we are actually a soul self and that we have something like a heart, the gateway into this present moment awakeness and awareness. And with our asleepness, with going below truth, as we call this in energy lingo. It's measurable. Okay, we can measure this in a person. When the vibratory rate of their energy goes below truth, that's when they fall asleep. That's when they basically get caught in their 3D virtual reality again, when they forget that they are a soul with a body, when they start thinking that they are a body with a soul, all right, and that soul part slowly falls away the lower we go, all right. When a person gets caught in that, that's when the person becomes unable to discern truth. So this is why judgment and looking back and grieving about the past and rehashing and re-traumatizing ourselves and seeking scapegoats and trying to find some kind of ego payoff in the honor of sacrifice and hardship, okay, is a complete ego illusion. It compromises our integrity and is therefore not life promoting. It is not conducive for our being. Not even, talking about some kind of idealized ivory tower spiritual mountaintop ascension crap. It's not about that, guys. It's about how to live a 3D life as a soul self. How to bring this into its highest expression. And the sense of urgency that is coming in right now, and this train that is leaving the station, and all these different metaphors that myself and others are using right now, comes in through the necessity to stay awake. So many of you are already waking up. And the biggest pain that you are currently experiencing is the flip-flopping back and forth, experiencing yourself going back into the sleepy state. All right. And then you come back out of it and you're like, fuck, what? Sorry, my English here. What just happened? Okay. So this is truth training, guys. This is what we need to form resilience with. We need to stop judging ourselves for going low. Yes, you're going to go low. You have a 3D body, you have emotions, and you have a mind, okay, that is bound to your 3D-ness, and you have a lot of energetic memory, you have pain memory, you have intellectual memory, and so forth, family karma, personal karma. All this belongs to your 3D-ness, and this will always be there. The easiest way to control people is to pull them into their own crap. The easiest way to keep them asleep. And this is what's been going on here in these last 10 years, through this consumerism, social media, and so forth. This is why all the narcissists are crawling out of their dark holes, because they have a worldwide stage now. It's always been there, guys. So nothing has changed. The world is not going down the drain. Or no, the world is actually in a process of actually having a chance. Okay, because all this is now being illuminated. But this requires us to really work with this truth and to learn to discern. It's all real, but it's not all true. That is our job. That's our responsibility. The urgency is coming in through feeling this pull now, feeling this impulse, this really strong download into our own future, into our own purpose. And why is this there all of a sudden? It's a very simple explanation. Because everything is changing right now. And that is about the worst that can happen to our ego, to our unhealthy ego. Everything is changing. There's uncertainty on all these different levels. Every value, everything that we believed in is now changing. Nothing the ego can hold on to. Okay? There's no status quo anymore. We have to learn how to deal with this new freedom of actually choosing. We have to learn now how to self-responsibly and in integrity, how to choose. And this is why these next 5 to 10 years are going to be very bifurcated, very split, very schismatic here in our collective, because there will be a lot of people who will choose to continue sticking to the old paradigm and trying to hold on to it white knuckled and trying to push this through, and it's not going to work. But it's going to create a little bit of turmoil here and lots of social unrest, lots of enragement, lots of conflicts worldwide, right? Until this can finally be resolved. This is the last upheaval of the old paradigm of being. And the old paradigm of being was based on control and force, the unhealthy solar plexus energy. Not the solar plexus energy is neutral, it's the regulator of our life force, but it's the unhealthy expression of that, the unhealthy ego. All right, and this now needs to come into reconciliation. The cool thing about us having been working on this for so long already is that we already see this. In fact, we don't even know why this took so long, because we've been feeling this all along. And now we are the wise people with all our trauma and with all our stuff. All right, we're suddenly realizing how much truth training, how much resilience training we already had to undergo forcefully, so unfortunately, but it has done something to us. It has not allowed us to stay in our ego illusion, because we are feeling it in our body, we're feeling it in our emotions, in our mind, we're feeling it everywhere, because this encounter with truth does not allow us to stay in untruth. And if we go into untruth, if we go asleep, we suffer, right? And we are aware that we're suffering, as opposed to, the people who are really asleep, because we've already had that encounter with truth. So this is the context to all of this. Now, on a collective level, guys, and this will be the main theme for 2020. Okay, is how this new paradigm of being, how this now takes effect in our society, how it changes all these different values, and how this going quantum, right, going from 3D into an energetic reality in which we can actually discern not just truths or untruths, but even the quality of truths. We can begin to discern and to calibrate, okay, how good something is, how powerful it is, how life promoting it is. This transition leads to a lot of uncertainty here for the collective. And, guys, if you have to have understanding for this, when all values are being sort of questioned, what does this do to people? First of all, it leads people into coping. So this is why it's the initial transition phase is bifurcated, because a lot of people dive under. Okay, they want to stay asleep. They don't want to wake up to this new reality. Okay, they want to cope. All right, and the other part of the population is going to seek. They're not going to seek. It's still coping. Okay, maybe I just have to be better. Maybe I just have to try harder. Maybe I have to control more. All right, and they're going to blindly seek for purpose, blindly seek to replace this illusionary sense of security that the ego has provided for them, to replace that with other illusions. And one of these expressions is this new agey transfigured spiritualism that does nothing than steering people into passivity, in reinforcing the old paradigm, because it still externalizes the power to discern truth. And it's still, I mean, just listen to all these people on YouTube talking about some kind of external rescuing force that is going to come, and all of a sudden everything is going to be fine. What the heck? That's not how this goes. This is very pragmatic, and this is what we need to tune into for 2020. This is hands-on, guys, and it's going to get ugly. Yeah, just like birthing, is extremely life-changing, is extremely beautiful, but it's also ugly, and until all this is done with the birthing process, we're going to have to deal with the truth of that. The cool thing is that through all this, an enormous influx of life force and manifestation momentum is unfolding, because the whole point of moving into this augmented, into this higher vibrational reality, okay, is a higher manifestation power, a faster pace. But until people realize this, okay, they're all just picking up on the endings of things. They're all just picking up on the uncertainty, okay. And for some time, this will create this replacement seeking, this idealization, this fanaticism on all levels, politically, these outcroppings of spiritual cults, be it political uh, craziness, social craziness, okay? All this is going to be part of the coming years, and especially in this year. So until we get to this place that we realize that we're all in the same boat, that these problems that we need to resolve now, that they require higher vibratory solutions. We cannot find them in this limited linear 3D-ness, the materialism of our being. We have to find this in the non-linear, in the quantum aspect of our being, where we recognize that the solutions are already there, and that it's due to our consciousness and our awakeness that allows it, the present moment awareness that allows us to find these solutions and to bring them into reality. Okay, so we're going to see a lot of new inventions this year, this next 2 years, a lot of new arts, a lot of new of this seeking. It will translate into new advancements for us. And I want to um, point out why so many astrologers and people in the predicting business, why they have been emphasizing this so much, and especially January 2020 as being sort of the pivotal point of this collective transformation. And that is because we have a very, very rare constellation astronomically and also energetically, a very rare energy signature. The last time this occurred on this planet is 500 years ago. And 500 years ago, guys, 1520, not the exact year, it's the era, okay, was the birth of the Renaissance. It was the birth of, advancement into a materialistic, science-based reality. It was also the birth of money, really. No, money existed before, but it was the birth of the banking system, let's put it this way. The institutionalized, intertwined banking system. Just think of Italy, Medici's, and so forth. But it was also the time when the church actually sent out people to discover science. Up until then, science didn't actually exist. It was mostly superstition. Okay, and the Earth is flat. Okay, that was still a going meme in the early 16th century. Okay, so guys, we are at a comparably groundbreaking development here for our collective, just based on the energy and based on these constellation, and we're actually seeing the effects this year. We're seeing all this happening. The future is there, and our job now is to be awake, to arrive in the now, so that we can partake in the future, so that we can, wake up to truth and become able to live and manifest in truth. All right, with a whole new understanding of spirituality, all right, with a whole new understanding of being a soul with a 3D body, soul self awareness, soulfulness. Think about it, guys. It has never been easier to be spiritual than right now. I mean, those of you who are younger might not know this, but those of you who are a little older, who've been around the all New Age corners, what was this like to be somebody who's interested in spirituality 30 years ago, even 20 years ago? Do you guys remember? When first the hippie and then the Hindu Bhagwan in the late 70s, early 80s, then into, this whole sort of movement of when meditation and yoga and all this started to become really big. This is what I meant with internalizing divinity, internalizing the spiritual power in us. This was all about breaking free from this religious dogma that we had been, that had been passed on from one generation to the other, that needed to be resolved. But I like the tenacity that you are bringing up here, and the persistence of truth. Right, and there's an aspect here that is also weaving through our collectives that we all feeling, and that has come forward in the last 30 years very strongly, and that will also lead to lots of paradigm shift, and that is the healing of the unhealed feminine, okay, the wounded feminine. And this has a lot to do with wisdom, with knowledge. Okay, remember the esotericism, the control of information in the past was undermined by this feminine wisdom, okay, by the witch knowledge, so to speak. Okay, I'm not talking Wicca. I'm talking, the knowing how nature works, knowing how cycles work, knowing things that we are not supposed to know because it would lead us into independence and into freedom. All right, and this was mostly suppressed through suppressing femininity. And I don't worry, guys. I'm not going to go on a tirade here, because feminism is one of these other unhealthy extremes. Okay, we're coming out of this traumatized place, going into the other extreme, and we're seeing this right now. The making the feminine special. Okay, making all this superior, okay, is just as unhealed as suppressing it. But this is a part of the normal stages of liberation. Okay, this has happened on all different levels, that it goes into the extreme, and it needs to come into harmony for it to come into its healthy expression. We need to realize that on a soul level, we're not different at all. Nobody is. There is no such thing as male or female on the soul level, and therefore all this can be transcended. We have a 3D, and yes, there we have something like gender and function and roles and so forth, but we can choose those, right? And just because we are women, doesn't make us the better people, okay? But it has required, hundreds of years, thousands of years, actually, for this to be carried on, this trauma, so that it come into resolution now. Okay, so this is also part of this practical spiritualism, that we let go of some of the tribal or gender specific karmic wounds that we carry. Yeah, so a lot of this Me Too and the sexual abuse, and also the abuse of children and so forth, this is now in its illumination phase. This will all be revealed in a sense that it'll be shocking, but nothing new really. Just the fact that it's no longer tolerated. So this is a social value that is changing there. It's. I grew up in a corporate world where it was totally okay to be sexually harassed, and that this was something that I had to suck up. That was normal. Everybody knew this. This is no longer the case. They're no longer withstanding the truth testing. The fear of being thrown into a nut house, the fear of being, declared or diagnosed by clinical psychology. Mindfulness has made this a little more accepted, quote unquote, in psychology, that de-stressing and meditating and breathing and somatics, using the body through practices like yoga and so forth, that this has a positive effect on the psyche, on the emotions, and that the spiritual connection actually helps people to overcome their mental and emotional schisms. But it's still, all this is still just in transition. We're still justifying and diagnosing things based on a paradigm that does not actually include the non-linear spiritualism. It doesn't include it yet. But this was a real scare 20 years ago, to actually talk about visions and talk about things that we see or hear, to not be Baker-acted, to not be robbed of our civil rights, because people diagnosed us as hallucinating or schizophrenic. Yeah. There is a lot of that now changing for us, guys, and brings in a lot of hope, and that brings in a lot of new spiritual freedom, visionary freedom, and that's why we can look forward to a development here that will, within 5 to 10 years, will bring forward whole new paradigms of existing. So I'm really happy for my youngest child, okay, he's 5 years old, to become a grown-up in a world that no longer has to deal with these schismatic paradigms. There'll still be residues of this, just like how every shift in society takes a couple of generations, but it's going to be a different level of awareness, a different level of wakefulness, and our children that grow up through us here as conscious parents, they've picked us for this purpose, guys. All right, so no need to feel guilty about your own insufficient parenting. uh, you know, your kids' souls, they knew what they were getting into, and they picked you for this reason. So let's turn this into a promiseful and optimistic perspective here for our collective, even though we know that we're going to have to go through a little bit of birthing pain. And that's the resilience training here that we will be undergoing in these next 2 years. So the next 2 years are going to be very turbulent. It's really going to shift a lot and challenge a lot of our values in the sense of what makes us feel secure. All right, all that is being challenged. All right, but the cool thing is we are literally learning how to stay awake, and through that, learning how to move from toxic cycles into healing cycles, into appreciating healing, into appreciating the sacredness of life and everything that um, belongs to this. So the forecast for January 2020 in context with these larger developments, yeah, the next year, the next 2 years, the next 5 to 10 years, the next 30 years, and the next 500 years that we've just illuminated, now appears as like what? Just a month, of training, really nothing special. But the nature of this training, this truth training here in January, is primarily about higher emotional processing, emotional learning, all right, learning how to deal with the disappointments of recognizing untruths of the past, the illusions of the ego, the betrayal, and the corruption of truth and power in the past. All right, and how this is, how this has really corrupted the integrity of us humans altogether. This is what makes January such a challenging month. But along with this also comes a whole new appreciation of life. And I'm going to illuminate here how this translates into these different areas in our personal lives. Obviously, we all have different karma, different trauma, and a different energy signature. So it translates differently into our lives. What do I need to pay attention to? Because remember, it's about our attentiveness and awakeness here in this next year or the years to come. And so truth training means that we have to stay in our present moment awareness at all times. The moment we are no longer aware that we are awake is the moment we are already asleep. Okay, and this is when we lose our energetic integrity, when our energies go low, when we are vibing low. Okay, when we are no longer in truth, when we cannot discern truth anymore, when we when we cannot feel our own integrity anymore, when we compromise our own boundaries, when we disregard our own needs and our own wants. So self-love, compassionate self-love, is not some new age concept. This is actually something that results out of the respect for the divine, or the sacredness of life, our own 3Dness. And this is linked to us realizing and living our needs and our wants in 3D, as well as our spiritual needs, which link us into our soul fullness and our soul self-awareness. So overall here, in this spiritual development into like more of a practical spirituality that is no longer dominated by idealization or externalization, institutionalization or dogma and so forth. This individuation of ourselves as soul selves has to happen now in conjunction with others. And the cool thing about January is that it will teach us through this spiritual emotional learning how to commune with others, how to communicate with others on a new level of awareness, how to seek and find like-minded, how to really discern which people are good for us and which aren't, moving from toxic into healing will show us here new levels of togetherness. So that's something to look forward to. Specific times that look particularly challenging in January are, as so many times, the times around the lunar cycle, the full moon and the new moon cycles. So there's astrological constellations here around the 10th and the 12th that are extremely rare, extremely way showing that we haven't seen in 500 years, which is linked to full moon. So this is typically when we go through a lot of emotional clearing and emotional illumination, emotional learning. Okay, and this is where we will recognize the sort of the scope of all this manipulation and collective gaslighting. All right, but only for us to pay more attention to it, to go into this higher spiritual emotional learning. All right. The second half of January it brings in a bit more conflict, a bit more need for communication, and this is where this opportunity will arise for us to actually work things out with other people and find our tribe, find our like-mindedness, the people that we can connect with on a soul level, not just intellectually, not just through our interests, but really on a soul level. And this has nothing to do with what group or what team we belong to. This is a resonance that we're going to feel from one true self to the other kind of level, where we recognize that we don't need to manipulate, we don't need to interfere. All we really need to learn is how to respect the sacredness of life through respecting other people's soul selves. All right, and their free choice. And if you have someone in your life that you love and You see them being asleep, and they choose to stay asleep or they choose to keep themselves asleep. And we need to respect that too. This is their sacred will coming into expression. It's very, very important. We cannot want people to heal or want them to see truth. All we can do, and this is something that uh, we discussed here earlier, is to radiate this out. We can radiate healing, we can radiate truth out, we can become sort of a human truth self radio. Okay, that's what we need to learn. That through this congruence and through this integrity of staying in truth at all times, this is what creates these resonances between us, what attracts like-minded people into our lives, what attracts synchronicities into our life, what attracts abundance and beauty and love. In other words, higher vibratory solutions into our life without us needing to seek or needing to force it. So, on a physical level, this discovery or remembrance of the sacredness of life will bring in a new level of organic understanding how we function, how all this, our physical needs and our spiritual needs and our emotional needs and all these things that we need to feel secure, okay, to calm our ego, all right, sort of a healthy ego, all right, to secure our survival, how all this can be harmonized, with nature and with other people's needs and wants, all right. And a way this will play out in our collective here on this physical level is that we're going to experience a really strong rush of life force coming in. So this, of course, can turn people also into sort of blind activism and upheaval and unrest. Okay, so this is why this is very, very uncertain how this is going to go. But one thing that I'm clearly seeing for January is that we're going to have to deal with issues of food and energy supply. This environmental awareness that is sort of on the rise here, that I predicted last year, that this would happen this year in 2019, is now turning into rage. Okay, and we've got to be a little careful there to not go overboard with this. Okay, so the planet itself, Gaia, has a soul as well. I've recommended this before. If you really want to tune into this, what you can do for the planet, my tip for you is go connect with the planet, talk to the soul of Gaia, talk to the spirit of the planet, just like how you would talk to your own soul self and connect with your own soul self and connect with other people's soul selves. Emotionally, the emotional security aspect, that comes forward for us here through recognizing the manipulation and the gaslighting that we've been subjected to, the trauma, the core of our trauma here of the past, and how it has corrupted our sense of self, that needs to go into recovery. All right. And many of us will have to discover that self-love has nothing to do with selfishness. Self-love is the higher expression of this respect and honor for the sacredness of life. All right. And the healing of our sense of self and the healing of our self-worth comes through self-love. And what it does to us, and this is here where spiritual emotions come in. What it does for us is that we will learn to transcend some of these emotional attachments, the pain of the past and the karmic stuff, that we will learn to deal with this, to practically deal with this through spiritual recontextualization. That the solution, okay, for our emotional insecurities, for our emotional problems, for the self-worth issues that we're having through all this needing, this emotional security, this dependency on others and externalizing our love to others, that this can be healed through a spiritual emotion that allows us to feel loved unconditionally. The very thing that we've been seeking all along that we've never received through our parents or our friends or even partners. Okay. And this allows us then to develop trust in our heart, to show us the way. That's a spirit, I call this a spiritual emotion. All right, this leads then into a higher vibratory understanding. All right, it is no longer an emotion in its transcended form, but a spiritual emotion as opposed to the 3D emotion that is tied to our body and to our 3D existence with the attachment that comes with it. Now, mentally, it's all about the spiritual freedom that comes through independent thinking, to realizing that what we have at our hands now is not just some concept, some idea, but it is us receiving information directly, no longer needing intermediaries for, be it our financial security, be it our emotional security, no matter what level of security we're looking at, we have now through our spiritual discernment, the awareness, the present moment awareness that allows us to be awake and discern truth, we now are holding the power of integrity in our own hands. Right? And there's a lot more of that. That's a spiritual thinkingness, right? That individualizes in us that most of us can't even grasp yet what this means. But it comes with things such as, of course, new ideas, new inventions, and so forth. So there's this new movement that is starting now, just like how the Renaissance, 500 years ago, how that started a new movement. So we're going into a whole new understanding of ourselves, less transfigured as it was 500 years ago, more truth-based, still probably first more like a spiritual romanticism. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing here for the next 5 to 10 years, but then really going into this individuated soul self-awareness for all of us, and we'll begin to understand that, right? But we will have to find our own voice in this, and we will have to give this an expression. We have to learn to communicate with ourselves and others, okay, with our own soul self, all right? And we have to also learn to identify when we are more or less getting pulled into this collective thinkingness that isn't even ours. We talked about this in December. When we get pulled into this lower vibratory ego illusion again, okay, that makes us go asleep again, right, where we lose our integrity, where we lose the ability to discern truth. So with this new level of independent thinking and freedom of that also comes this self-responsibility of needing to stay awake, needing to stay consciously aware of your awareness at all times, because that is what transmutes your collective thinkingness into something that we call higher consciousness. And there's a lot of new ways of learning involved in this. Some of you who work with me already know this. I call this meta learning. This is a quantum level of learning where we tune into a higher consciousness and allow this information to be transcoded through us and learn how to uh, discern information this way in a completely new experience. Socially, in our relationships, in January will be a little tricky. Okay, so we're gonna actually have to translate this new level of sacredness and soul self-awareness into new ways of interacting with another. We've talked about this a little bit. Any kind of wanting somebody else to see truth or wanting somebody else to heal, the unhealed healers syndrome will lead to a more untruth. So we really going to have to learn how to translate this respect, and the sacred choice that we all have here as a soul self, awake or asleep, okay? But this is not our job to do this for others, okay? The only responsibility that we actually have, and this is a huge responsibility, is the responsibility to our own soul self, all right, to bring that which we truly are, namely divine creation, into its highest expression. This is what we all came here for. And on a relationship level, that means that we have to respect other people's choices on all levels, even these toxic choices of our loved ones. Okay, so to let go of that, and stop hoping that somebody would finally heal or finally change. This is it's part of this toxic passivity where we've been waiting for something to happen. It's not, you don't need somebody else to heal in order to come into your highest expression. Your responsibility is to come into your higher expression at all times, regardless of what your loved ones choose. It's sad, and yes, we have to deal with, the loss of the ideal, the loss of the fantasy bond of the, what we had sort of pictured, how it would elevate us if we could do this with this person. But in reality, we've externalized our love to this other person, and also infringed in this way. And spiritually, we've talked about this at length here today. It's a whole new level of spirituality coming into expression, and we went through this internalization of our spirituality, our own spirituality here in these last 30 years, all right, and learned the ways of esotericism. And this is now needing to come into an expression, which means we need to bring this into the outside, into our practical life here in this whole entire year. But we're feeling this now here in January. Esotericism is turning into exotericism, all right, and this requires us to come out of the woodwork, and to finally, be congruent with being a spiritually awake person. So a lot of you guys will feel this really, really strong impulse now to do something with all this knowledge that you've gained and all the knowing that you've gained and your ability to discern truth. I want you to see the opportunity in that skill that you've acquired, the truth training that you've been undergoing over these last 30 years. Yes, this has value now. It's never been easier to be spiritual. But of course, there's also this blind seeking for purpose and leading to a lot of outcroppings and spiritual fanaticism and new age transfiguration. Okay, so we're still going to have to read through this a little bit. This can come to an expression through you because you've already undergone this truth training. And energetically, this is now basically the beginning of this whole entire going quantum, all right, moving from linearity into non-linearity, moving away to an augmented paradigm of reality, namely understanding that it's all a hologram, that the information of the whole is contained in the tiniest part. All this is boring for those of you who don't really have a scientific backdrop, and it's completely irrelevant. But I mean, to intellectually understand this, but what it really is this transition from 3D-ness, okay, into a not 5D, okay. This is complete BS, guys. But symbolically, you can call it 5D if you will, but it's not 5D, all right. Into a soul self-awareness, into an energy awareness, and seeing ourselves, with this soul being that we truly are here on this 3D level, but also seeing this operating on other energetic etheric realms, okay, in other dimensions, because all this is happening simultaneously. And this will be a huge industry here in the future: energy awareness, energy healing, energy therapy, and learning how to navigate, how to traverse those energetic realms that we can all produce within ourselves, and we can navigate them within ourselves. We just have to learn how to do this so that we can do this safely, because this is literally for most of us uncharted territory. But it leads to a whole new level of visionary freedom, and with this, a whole new value system for us individually as well as collectively. For those of you interested in the energy centers, the chakra activity here in this month, you're going to continue feel this first and sixth chakra resolution, karmic resolution theme that we're carrying over from November and December. Okay, this is the training of this the last 2 months, was to really go and recognize these intergenerational and tribal and karmic collective phantom pains and traumas that we have there that need to be resolved, that need to be transcended within ourselves so that we can move past it. That's the first and the sixth chakra. See, recognizing how this safety and security aspect and this belonging is really a karmic issue. Okay, but then, and this is the bad news, is and why this can be expected to be a turbulent and challenging month, is that a lot of our emotional and ego stuff, sort of the unhealthy ego part of us, the attachments that we have, the second and third chakra issues, all right, that they're going to be magnified in January, which is why it can be expected to see unrest and upheaval in our societies, in our collectives. Okay, this needs to move into more truthful expression. All right, this needs to include the heart mind, the fourth and the fifth chakra, where we bring this into different ways of communicating and seeing others. So everything that I have presented here has to do with this, resolving second and third chakra issues through heart awareness, present moment awareness, okay, and learning how to communicate, how to bring this into a more truthful expression. And then in the later sort of third of the month, a new aspect is coming in. There's a very strong emotional relationship related aspect where we really need to learn how to commune with others, how to find security through working with others and supporting others. So a lot of you guys will feel the impulse to contribute, the impulse to support, maybe on a community level, maybe on a self-help group level, but to commune with like-minded, and to really, sort of focus on what's healthy for you and no longer fight against what's toxic. Okay, just step out. All right, develop a strategy for stepping out. This is the last week of this month. You have to have an exit strategy, guys. It's very, very important. So those of you who still are in toxic relationship or workplaces, use January to form a strategy on how to get out, because you need to have the emotional and financial and the practical security already lined up in order to make this quantum leap. All right. If you get attached to your thinking, if you identify with a thought or an idea or the false self personality, like how you think you have to be and seeing yourself through the eyes of others and, externalizing your love to others and so forth, you are no longer in truth. You guys all get wrapped up about, oh, it's so hard to find this again. Well, that's your attachment. The attachment is that it is hard to do this. Okay, you just have to shift it and say, okay, I caught myself being asleep. Turn back on. Now I'm aware. I'm aware that I'm awake. All right. I'm going to look at my reality right now. Okay. While I was asleep, I created more untruths. Oh, well. So that's my responsibility now to clean this up. Piece of cake. And yes, this is the pathway to resolving this traumatized sense of self and self-worth. Okay. It's comes through self-love, and self-love comes through honoring and respecting the sacredness of life. No, we're not going to die in 2020. That's correct. There is a big, long future after that. I can't vouch for anything beyond the next 500 years, okay? But I'm not, the me is not going to be there to prove this. But yes, this is not doom. On the contrary, yeah, this is awakening to truth training, as I called this forecast for January 2020. Self truth. Yeah, the truthing ourselves. Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your support. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of the Sacred Self Healing Training Program. Thank you for your attention and your intention. Thank you for letting me be part of this. This concludes the forecast. Right? And I want you to verify all of this yourself. All right. And to take advantage of this spiritual freedom that is forming in you right now, the ability to access truth. See you soon. Bye bye.